Hello and welcome to Speaking from the Heart with Sapi, a space for creatives, opinion leaders, and captains of industries to connect and have conversations on Africa and the issues that affect us. Our guests are individuals from all walks of life, each at the top of the game, who will be coming in to teach us and enrich us from their life experiences. In today's episode, we will be looking at the role that publishing of African stories plays in the advancement of African societies. Our guest is Selina Zigomo, a Zimbabwean brand and self-publishing specialist. Her brand-building career spans 2 decades in senior management, strategy development, and client relations across advertising, public relations, and corporate communications for both private and development sectors. She holds a qualification in journalism from Rhodes University, Grahamstown in South Africa. As a pioneer in the provision of self-publishing services in the region, she has edited and produced over 30 non-fiction titles available in local bookstores as well as Amazon to date. She has also hosted 2 seasons of the Tando Channel Book Club on 3K TV, which airs on DSTV channel 293 in 2022 and 2023, with her 3rd season now airing exclusively online at Tando Channel on YouTube. She is passionate about being the change that you want to see and wants to inspire Africans to pick themselves up and be first in line to realize their full potential. Hi, Selina.
Hi, Sapi.
Isn't this weird? I am sitting where you would normally sit.
Yeah, it's very weird for me.
How does it feel for you? Because I know control and everything, you know? How are you feeling?
It's super awkward.
But I've been looking forward to this.
Well, I'm glad you have.
And we finally found some time to do it.
Yeah.
Wow. I always like to start with just some backstory. So for our viewers, I know that you grew up in fact, your family's more girls than guys.
Mm-hmm.
And you're all, yikes, alpha females. So tell me what it was like growing up in a house of alpha females and how anything actually ever got done.
I think things got done also, we thought, because of my mother. Because there's only a number one spot,
Right.
Yeah, there's, and then everything else follows. And I think my mother was quite good in terms of setting an order of how she wanted to see a chain of command happen. And then I think as you get older in a family, whether you're all boys or all girls, you start to find your own voice. And so then, people kind of fall off that chain of command. And then I think as your parents age, somebody gets left being the reliable child. So it's very hard to answer that question because I'd have to look through the window of which part of my childhood.
Right.
It was so different. But I think I only really realized that women were such a big part of my life and how I see the world when I had to leave that setup and started to realize that, actually not everybody has 4
Right.
sisters and a brother and a mother and many strong women and all of those things. And for me, I think my situation was unique because both of my grandmothers had a really strong imprint on my sense of identity and who I was. So my name Selina is my paternal grandmother's name.
Oh, wow.
And she died the year I was born. So she died earlier that year. I was born later that year. And then my maternal grandmother is really the one that raised me. So I remember having a conversation with my parents a couple of years back, and we were having dinner. It was during the COVID years, the lockdown years. And we were talking about those years, and my mom and dad just said to me, "Yeah, you were never really ours, hey? You were hers. That was your person."
Okay.
It shaped, I think, my sense of identity in terms of value.
Right.
Because I think I was her favorite, and I think everybody gets a favorite, and that's allowed.
Yes, yeah.
So
And it's okay.
so I was her favorite. She was mine. After she died, I think my mom was my favorite. Definitely in recent years, my dad was my favorite.
Yeah.
And those are special experiences. But yeah, definitely my identity was shaped by those two women, one in her absentia, because I carried her name, and many people connected her memory and who she was to them.
Oh, wow, that's pretty special.
Yeah, through my existence. And I kind of was like, I'm only starting to really get to know her story now.
Okay.
And then, the grandmother I did know. And it's weird because now I'm learning about my mother as an individual and not a parent, and accessing my maternal grandmother in a different way.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay. And you come across to me as a firstborn. Like, I know you're not a firstborn, but you really present yourself as a firstborn. Was that, did you think that sort of came like your mom said, you were not really there? So you were like raised by your grandmother. And probably the input that normally goes into a firstborn was probably poured out into you. I don't know, because you really, are like a firstborn, and I know you're not in terms of number.
No, I'm a strong middle child. I'm number 4.
Okay.
And I have the middle child temperament. I think textbook case, a middle child temperament, wanting everybody to be together. And definitely, I think at times carrying a peacemaker role, but my sisters will tell you different, because they'll be like, she's always ready to cause. So, I guess it's different perceptions and perspectives from different spaces and time. But I think the firstborn energy really, I think, came in my adult years when my parents moved back. And I was now the reliable child. But before that, I think, I had a wild and reckless youth like everybody else, and worked out all of my...
I'm trying to picture Selina wild and reckless.
And did all of my middle child stuff, definitely. And I think even now I still have very strong middle child energy. But I think to see it, you have to have the whole set together.
Right.
You got to have the whole set together. But now I was living with my parents as an adult. Most of my siblings are away, and then you kind of become an only child / eldest child. And then if your parents are especially elderly like mine, like post 70, you then also become the parent to the parents.
Yes. Yes.
So those dynamics, I think, are what give me that firstborn energy.
It rings very true, very true. What's been the most defining experience of your life journey so far, and how has it shaped how you live life and the journey that you're on?
I'm suddenly really empathizing and sympathizing with everybody I've interviewed, because I'm like, it's one of those questions where you're like, defining moments. I guess I've had defining moments for different aspects of my life.
Yeah.
I think I've recently come to understand that the trajectory of a person's life has many parallel tracks running at the same time. And so you can be a person who's actually experiencing 4 seasons of the weather at the same time. So like as a woman, you could be in your summer. In your career, you could be feeling like you're in a winter. In your family setup, you could be feeling like you're in an autumn, and so forth and so forth. So I have a few defining moments for those different parallel tracks. And it's really difficult to think of the one that would be most appropriate now to speak of. But I guess it would be when I decided that publishing was for me, in particular self-publishing was for me. I had done a few jobs in the communications industry, which is very broad, as you know.
Yes.
But a lot of people think that all we do is like write nice letters and press releases. But it's a really broad and diverse field. And so I did some advertising, I did some PR, I did some branding, and sort of stumbled into self-publishing when I was working full-time in ministry. And at the time, self-publishing was really it was like the swear word of publishing, because it was like, it wasn't considered literary. How can you decide that your work is good enough to publish all by yourself, and just because you have money, put money behind that and put that out into the world? But a lot of people missed that Amazon at that time, and Jeff Bezos behind it, were really pioneering the democratization of information that is the whole heartbeat of how we live and sort of experience life today, because there's so much more information than knowledge. And then we'll ever be able to consume. So, and that democratization is actually very, very important, because who's to say what makes a good book? And what creates that standard? So I think for me, I had sort of dabbled in all of these places and was kind of at a crossroads. It would have been, I think, when I was working for a charity doing grant writing. And it was kind of, I'd taken the job to kind of give myself a moment, a time out to get out of my head and start to feel myself again, in terms of, sometimes you need the routine of going somewhere 9 to 5. And, a job that's bog standard, so that you can, not solve the problem and just allow the answer to come to you. And I remember and back then I used to smoke, so I was sitting in the back garden.
I did not know that.
Yes, chain smoker of note. I
did not know that.
Yes. So I was sitting in the back garden, and I tell this story when I did my self-publishing workshops. When I eventually launched my company, I took a picture, and there was like a pile of cigarette stumps. And I was like sitting outside, and it was the end of a work day, and I kind of was like, Selina, is this all there is? Is this going to be, is this what it's going to be for you? Is this what it's going to amount to? And like, what's your deal? Like, what is it that you want to do? And I suddenly realized in that moment that I had fallen in love with the book industry. Books were always my love, and I was just going to do it, whether or not I was the best at it, whether or not I knew the most about it, whether or not I was good at it. But if I loved it enough and brought that to it and continued to do that, over time I would become good enough. And maybe I would, in the process of becoming good enough, tell some stories that might not change the world, but definitely change somebody's life.
That's amazing, Sal. So you came to people say come to Jesus moment.
Come to Jesus, yeah.
And you just made that decision. And that was the birth of Ngano.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it was a literal come to Jesus moment, because I think in that time I was going through counseling at the Christian Counseling Center. I was very ashamed of being a smoker and having been a smoker for so long, because I think a lot of people don't realize that many smokers actually start out from teenage rebellion. And so it's not a badge that I think people wear and are like, I think, but that's a story for another day. But, and I was in a time where I was praying, as in speaking out loud to God, and that was the conversation that was being had. And so many times, I'm grateful for it, because many times I've had to look back on that moment to recenter myself. Like the GPS, when you get lost,
yes.
to recenter myself, like, are we going to get to where we're going? And all of those things. So it was powerful to me. It was a literal come to Jesus moment. And I went from strength to strength and saw myself do things I didn't believe I could do, like quit smoking, for instance, and launch Ngano and help 30-odd people publish their books, and some forth and so forth and so forth. So, yeah, it was good.
And how long have you been running Ngano? Because I know, like, our landscape in Zim has been, from a business perspective, like, tumultuous, it's been up and down, and it's quite challenging. And that decision to start a business in this environment, looking back now, what are some of the pain points that you went through, and some of the key learnings in your journey as you've gotten better and better at your craft?
So let me start off by saying this. I was listening to an interview of some really famous entrepreneur, and he said, if I knew how hard it was to start a business, I wouldn't have started a business. And that's one of the successful ones, because the journey of, if we're looking at entrepreneurship, in that sector, there are many failures. And then the second thing I'd then like to follow that up with is to say that I wouldn't call myself a good business person or a good entrepreneur. And definitely when I started the journey, I wasn't thinking, oh, this is going to be so easy. Like that moment I described earlier was actually quite a heart-wrenching, heart-rending moment for me. And it almost felt like there was no other choice. And that was both due to the operating environment and also due to the compulsion or that falling in love or that come to Jesus moment. So for me, there was no choice. There is no choice. And when we're looking at publishing, because I think it's also, I really picked a wonderful place to, throw my hat in the ring. The Zimbabwean publishing ecosystem has been mired with so many stars have risen, people better than me, so much more amazing than me, who've put out work that's incredible and that's touched the heart of so many people, but have not been able to get past the 10-year mark or, and other people who have really captivated the hearts and minds of people all over the world have had to close down after being in publishing for 25 odd years. So it's not, this battlefield is not, it's not an easy one. And then you put us in an operating environment where people don't have disposable income to buy books. And then if you look at the nature of a book is a very easy thing to consume because you can read a book in a week. You can read a book in a month. It's almost like a fast-moving consumable good. But what it takes to get out the one book in an environment like this is incredible, and people will never understand. They don't understand. So I think the pain points are the fact that it's something I didn't feel like I could opt out of. So that's definitely one of those things. And I knew that it was going to be hard. It was going to be painful on so many levels. The pain points are also around quality. And that's a huge thing for me. And I think it's a timeless rule in publishing. If the content isn't good quality, it's not going to sell. That's the first thing to get right. And that's a very hard trick, especially in the world we live in today, because a lot of people feel like I can write, therefore I should be published, or I want to write.
Because of digital.
Exactly. And, I got 1,000 likes on my long caption on Instagram. Surely I am literary. I've got something to say. And a lot of people are not saying anything that is putting our world into a big picture perspective that makes us want to do better, be more, think deeper. A lot of it, especially if you're looking at social media content, is quite surface level. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's 80% of the stuff that's out there, that's scary. Because you are what you consume, you are what you eat, you become what you behold, you're also what you read. And if a meme a minute, where do we think we're going with that? So that's also very, very challenging, the quality conversation. And then I think the sales, because we've got this idea that there isn't a reading culture, but actually there is. If we look at WhatsApp novels, that is like booming right now. So there is a demand, and there's a demand for diverse content, but the industry is so fragmented, it's been so constrained, it hasn't made room for all of these different voices, different languages, different genres, different categories. And so now people are, I think, like I had in that moment, feeling like, well, I have no choice. I'm going to do my own thing and innovating. And readers are partnering with them to now find ways to get the content that they want. So there's that aspect as well. But like, as we do that, what does that mean for securitization of intellectual property? Is the author getting what they should get or what they deserve?
Right.
by putting out their work that way. So wonderful that we now realize there is a reading culture, there is a demand, there is also a supply, but is it a win-win? Are we getting what we want out of it? And if everybody is doing their own thing, when do we congregate around common values as a sector, and then through that solidarity gain a competitive advantage in the global market?
Right.
Because we must remember that in the digital age, all of our works are competing every day against stuff that's coming out from Korea, stuff that's coming out from China. I mean, South Korea, China, the UK, the US, Australia, all of Nigeria, if we're looking at the continent, South Africa, Ghana, so it's, you are immediately plunged into a globally competitive space, which it wasn't always like that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So these are all of the dynamics and the pain points, and every day you have to sort of put that away and work, then drill down to the work that's in your hands, that the book that's in your hands for that period of time.
Okay.
Give it its best shot, and then release it into the wild.
So you've spoken a lot around the ecosystem of books and literature, and I think kind of like the role that publishing plays in terms of being a mediator, quality check, etc. You kind of spoke in the beginning about, why self-publish anyway? Why not trade publish? And a lot of people would think, I'm self-publishing because I couldn't find a home. Just tell us about, just quite briefly, about the dynamics between trade and self-publishing.
So trade publishing has definitely got a lot more gatekeepers, right? So I think if we're looking at the conversation when self-publishing was becoming a thing, so that would have been the late 2000s, 2008, 2009. That was the pain point that was being solved, but it was a Western pain point.
Right.
So people were, but who are you to tell me that my book isn't good enough? And in some cases, there was truth to that, because the gatekeepers in trade publishing were saying it's not good enough. So they're standard stock things that we say. So first of all, it's going to take you 18 to 36 months to get your book out with a trade publisher. If you self-publish, you could probably cut down that time by 75%.
So
that's how drastic.
Market.
So yeah. Then the second thing is that there is more, if you self-publish, even if it's a niche genre, sci-fi, fantasy, whatever, that is deemed to not have a big market, you can still put your work out there, and you can gain a cult following. We've seen it. And so you can do that. You can do that for yourself, and when you then gain that following, it gives you leverage when you now have to consider your next work and going the trade publishing route. So the trade publishing route basically or simply is a publisher upfronting the cost for you, and therefore taking all of the risk for you, and you just have to write and put the book out. When you self-publish, you're taking all of the risk, but also you gain all of the reward.
Right.
So, and that has looked different at different seasons and times in the evolution or the journey of what publishing is becoming.
Okay, all right. You said, I don't know if you remember this, but this is something that you at least wrote, maybe not said, but until we amplify the visibility of women writers and the stories they tell, our identity within our psyche as a people will never be complete. And incomplete identities lack agency and responsibility. As a publisher, what does this statement mean?
So as a publisher, I think the statement means that, well, for me, the majority of the writers I work with are women. I work predominantly more with women. And that is not, like I didn't go to a workshop, a DEI workshop, and kind of finesse this. It's just the nature of my background. That's what I know. And I'm a fan of the Jane Austen quote, I write what I know. And I think it's the same with business and what you apply your mind to. So I'm like, this is what I know. Chemistry with women is better. I understand the unspoken cues and the spoken cues. I get it, and I attract more women, right? And so to me, on a personal level, that's what it's about. But also, if we look at a lot of what we are finding through research, for instance, research on intermittent fasting, there's this wonderful author I love, Dr. Mindy Peltz. She wrote a book called Fast Like a Girl, and she spoke about all the research was done on men.
Right.
And yet men and women are so biologically different, especially if you look at it from a hormonal lens.
Yeah.
And hormones have a lot to do with how we sleep, mental health, and so many health outcomes. And then we want to apply the same findings to two very diverse groups of people. The story is incomplete because one group is failing or they're getting success that is limited. And then we put the failure on them, but we haven't given all of the information. So I think it's the same with all races. Once we start seeing more diverse content on our streaming sites, which I think they are trying really hard to do that, But once it's the level, the playing field is more level. So it's those creators having more bargaining power, because I do think there's still a top-down element to how acquisitions are being made and entry into that space. But once we have more of brown faces, more languages available, then we start to get, I think, a bit more of the complete story. And then I think we're in a better position to be like, okay, so social values, this is what we really think. As people, as human beings, we should, look after our elderly, but we're not. We're not doing that. And so what then happens is we make other people who are not like us feel inherently weak, because we take away their power to tell their story. And if they can't tell their story, how can they begin to articulate a solution that works in their life and in their unique circumstances?
Yeah, I get you 100%. Let's talk about Thando Book Club. You have been co-producer of Thando since the very, very beginning. What drew you into what Thando Book Club is and is trying to achieve that made you say yes?
Okay, so what Thando Book Club is not what I thought it would be. What drew me into it was you, because you called me up and you were like, I've been thinking about a book club. And I was like, oh, that's a really good thought. That's a good idea. Somebody should do that. And you were like, what would that look like? And I was like, well, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. And then you were like, well, why don't you do it? And I was like, really? And I was like, I don't think I would be good on TV. I don't think that's me. I don't think that's really what I do. And then we started doing the online shows. And the online shows are still, I think, one of the special seasons, because with the online shows, there's something about the online space that's very forgiving, very creative. They were live. So it was like every Wednesday.
Live TV.
Yeah, every Wednesday it was Norman, my brother, on doing the StreamYard and the whatever, and then it was Sapi, right? And it was the three of us, and it was like such a special time. And I think the whole thing about every Wednesday, I know that by 6:30 my makeup needs to be on. By 6:45 I need to be on the group call with the guest. Sapi's going to be there. Norman's going to be there. We're going to go live. And all the crazy things that can happen on a live show. Is my dad going to forget that I am streaming and walk past, and how do we angle the thing, and what about the light, and will the electricity go off, and will the internet drop down, and will the internet on the other side? And it was
Can they hear me?
Yes, it was an incredible adventure. But then there was this magic that started to happen very early on, because I think you get caught up in the technical aspects and the admin and the time, and will this look good, and will it be like this? And then you start doing it, and you're in the conversation, and you're talking to the person, and you're like, wow, that is really profound, or you're like, that is so amazing. And we had these special moments, that we managed to capture and put out there, where we unearthed, I believe, treasures of the African continent, women who had been writing for children women who wrote for TV shows that really stole people's hearts, women who, like we were talking about her earlier, Dr. Sindiwe Magona, who I remember when we went live on her show, she had just gotten her result for her PhD, and she turned 70 that year, and she was like, I'm 70 and I just got my PhD result. I'm officially, a doctor. And she had written 20, 30 children's books in vernacular languages, plus her memoirs, plus worked at the UN. And it was like the stories that they wrote, and then the stories behind those stories. And then the stories of them. It was such an incredible privilege and such an incredible gift to give to ourselves and to the world.
Those were special.
They were really, really special, So, and I think the book club then introduced itself to us. So by the time we transitioned to television, we were now like, this is the book club. This is what it is. But really, when we were doing it online, it was kind of like, it was like the Wild West. It was like, those gold panners. We're going to go, we're going to find the gold, and we're going to do this, and everything's going to change. That's really what it was. And it was special, and it was incredible. And now, when we took it to TV, I think we were able to really just take a certain group of women by storm, because I think the dynamic of our audience started to shift and change differently. And then when we were doing offline events, it was the same. And so it was a very, I think the book club said to us, hi, this is who I am and this is what it is. And then we just were privileged and honored enough to be the chosen ones to kind of be like, okay, let's steward that and let's share that with the world. But like I often say, I would, if it had not been books, I would never have said yes.
I know, because they're your first love. They're
I would never have said yes. I'd have been like, it would have been a hot red no.
And they introduced you to a whole new medium and a whole new world and a whole lot of new fans that I know love the work that you do and you've been doing on the book club. And season 3 is your final season on the book club. What is life after the book club for Selina?
Well, I'm looking forward to reading books by men. Reading more books by men.
To start off
with. Also reading books from people from a whole lot of other ethnicities. So I'm looking forward to taking back that space in terms of reading, because I've always read diversely, very broadly. And so I'm looking forward to getting back into that. I'm going to lean in more in publishing. I'm a fan of, doing one thing and doing it really, really well. And I think that was one of my driving motivators, and sort of saying, okay, I think, the sun has set on this season for me. And I was incredibly blessed to create something so magical and special. And for somebody to believe in me on that level and to entrust me so much. Because I remember the first television season, Sapi was like, okay, I'm off. I'll be away, but you got this. And I was like, oh.
I wasn't there, yes.
And,
I was in Zambia.
And you were quite anxious, right?
I was.
You were really, really, because you'd send texts and you're like, I am anxious, I'm anxious, but you're like, you're going. But I think there's something so incredible about being entrusted on that level by somebody that you look up to, somebody who has, I think, worthwhile ambitions, somebody who's established in the marketplace. I think when you bestow that trust on someone, it unlocks the autonomy we all want in our work to really bring out the best. And to really rise to that responsibility and kind of be like, because she trusts me, I can. And even when I don't know, I at least have the efficacy to figure it out and solve the problem because I am entrusted. So that was incredible. And I hope to be able to find other partners like that. And the team behind the book club that grew around the book club, amazing, working with people who show up, know what they're doing. And like that was really magical for me. So I would love to do that again, but I think not with the not in a book review space, maybe around a publishing space, but I'm leaving that open. But I think in terms of finding more stories, deep storytelling, unearthing that, finding the stories that might change somebody's world, that's really what I'm going to be doing. And some of those stories might be teachings. Some of those stories might be memoirs. I think the bulk of them will definitely be African, but I think deep storytelling is where I'm headed. So more also creating the things that I was such a fan of on the book club. And in a way, the book club, I think, prepared me and taught me a lot about how that can get done. Because I think when you talk to all these different authors, you just realize the breadth and the scope. It was like, I went to university. I went to, how to publish in Africa University. That's what it was like. And all of the different ways that things can be done. So I don't think that was a very direct answer. If I marked that in a communications exam, I'd be like, fail.
It was heartfelt, and it was authentic, and it was everything that it needed to be. And we're winding down now, but you're definitely a force to be reckoned with in the publishing space, in the book world. You know everything there is to know about the book world.
Wow.
And I know in the beginning you said, I didn't know if I was prepared for this, but I think as you've walked the path, certainly that the excellence has come through, the showing up has come through, and the knowledge has come through. And I know you've prepared a reading for us. She bought so many books because she couldn't figure out which one she wants to read. But I just want to say thank you to everybody who's tuned in, who's been watching us. Would love to hear your comments. So get to us on social, #SpeakingWithSapi, and tell us what you think about publishing in Zim, publishing in Africa, and we'd love to hear from you. So Sal, we're going to leave the last couple of minutes to you. It's been amazing having you on the show and making you uncomfortable being in that seat and me uncomfortable in this seat. But I'd love to hear what you've prepared for us and what you're going to read for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Sapi. It's been super orcs, as the children say. I was asked to bring some of my favorite books, and so I brought Sindiwe Magona. I'm currently going through this part 1 memoir. I've got her other one at home. This one, Redefining Red, because it's from a Christian author who worked in the media, and because I think we need more Christian voices, female voices in the media space, and people who are not ashamed to say that that's their belief. And I'm currently sort of making friends with the story of the cross again. It's not a story, it's the truth of the cross. And this is a very powerful sort of breakdown of the value, the meaning, and the transformation that comes from the cross. And because I love true stories, this God's Generals, God's Generals, love this because there are stories of perceived failure. But what I love about this kind of storytelling is there is no sweeping things under the rug, and I love that because I think you can learn from someone's not so shiny moments, probably even more than when they do shine. And so I chose this piece because it's from this book called Dancing with God, Dancing with Madness, Confessions of a Bipolar Pastor. It's a South African pastor, Paul Cameron. And so it's not something you're going to find easily on a bestsellers list somewhere. But when I read it, I was so captivated by this story. And I'm going to read just a little piece from the epilogue. I'll start. Restoring people to mental health is a complex and mysterious process. At the start, there is just the horror, the emptiness and isolation that accompanies so many psychiatric conditions. My first instinct was to run from what was happening to me, to pretend the illness didn't exist. Over time, I had to frame my own story, to put it into words that captured my pain. To be mentally ill means you must fully bear the unfairness of your illness. For me, chronic depression at the age of 15 wrenched me from normality. Much later on, I was able to describe the experience of depression as penetrating the whole veneer of life, as an experience of an abyss that seemed to undergird so many of my years. Time and time again, I heard the whisper that is all meaningless. To come back from that and take your place in the normal patterns of life is no easy task. Ultimately, you have to face your own predicament, but crucially for me, I didn't do it alone. My conversion initiated a process of healing for me, and through the many subsequent depressive lows, the depths, through the dark and gloom, I heard another insistent voice. This was the whisper of life, of health, of love, of goodness. This voice was never sharp or shrill, but it sang a quiet and steady tune of hope among the many voices of hopelessness. It spoke life to my innermost being. Later, when I was to suffer debilitating depression as a Methodist minister, the voice was louder and more persistent, songs and prayers of hope resounding in my innermost being. With each new step, each new conversation, each new insight around my illness, each experience of love shown in my life, a living, pulsating voice willed on my freedom. When I lay on the ground feeling a little awkward, allowing others to pray more of the Holy Spirit's presence into me, I knew this was the part of the freedom I so desperately sought. I don't yet have that complete freedom, but the voice of the Spirit continues to whisper, to enlighten, to delight me. The journey is utterly personal. The Spirit uses your language, your senses, your inner life to communicate love and hope. And yet the experience is also wonderfully general, the journey bearing similarities to the journeys of freedom that mark the lives of so many. To help others recognize and articulate this journey of the Spirit, this dance of healing, for me, constitutes the beginnings of a spirituality of recovery and mental health. There is a God who cares deeply for the mentally ill, and by His Spirit wants to partner us on a journey of discovery, freedom, and integration.